Occupy the Vote. I'm Aron Goldman. I'm the Executive Director of the Springfield Institute. We're here to raise the level of debate, but broaden participation in the debate about bold ideas to fix American cities. Speaking of, let's talk about Springfield, Massachusetts. 153,000 people, a new majority-minority city, 39% Latino, and really ongoing crises in the area of public safety, the economy, and education. For all of these reasons, about this time last year, Jose Tosado announced his candidacy for mayor. I helped run his campaign. He was the first Latino city councilor in Springfield, the first Latino candidate for mayor in the history of the city, and he would have been the first Puerto Rican mayor in the history of the state of Massachusetts. Long story short, he lost fabulously. In part because white wards voted at two to three times the rate of minority wards, where in Ward 3, for example, only 11% of registered voters actually showed up to cast a ballot. And that year, unfortunately, wasn't an anomaly. The prospect of a black governor or a black president didn't really do much to shrink that gap between minority wards and white wards, except you see a little blip for Scott Brown in the white wards last year. That had an effect. And unfortunately, voter participation was not an anomaly either. Unequal democracy is reflected in Springfield, in the economy, in the schools, in the jails, and in health and the environment. Just last week, USA Today published a story about the racial opportunity gap. At the top of the list, doing the best, Pittsburgh, Portland, Maine. At the bottom of the list, Springfield, Hartford, Providence, and actually Springfield scored lowest nationwide. Profound inequality like this makes it look like the civil rights movement never even happened. But of course it did, and a lot of the explicit institutional racism is gone. But then how do we explain this persistent inequality that we see? Well, if you're talking about voter participation, for example, one of the big explanations is go to that Reagan-generated mythology about the welfare queen, reinforced by Bill Clinton with the 1996 Welfare Reform Act, or think about the apathetic, lazy minority voters who just don't care. I'm the only one with Garfield tonight, I think. Or some people are still scratching their head and saying, I don't really know why minorities aren't voting. The election commissioner in Springfield said she really doesn't understand what happened. Here are some very important explanations, and this is what I want to share with you tonight. The first, the weather. You guys know about the terrible tornado that hit Springfield in June. These are actually not wind currents. These are the prospects of Jose Tosado winning the election, being sucked up into the atmosphere. Why? Because the mayor enjoyed unlimited positive PR and photo ops with Scott Brown and the governor and John Kerry. Do you like the way he learned to point with his walkie-talkie? I thought that was pretty cool. But normal campaigning became totally unnecessary. The other important explanation for what happened? Waiting, suspense, voter suppression. It's much easier to imagine sinister Republican plots in faraway places like South Carolina or Alabama. It's a little less comfortable to think about voter suppression in Massachusetts, isn't it? Well, in fact, we witnessed firsthand federal voting rights violations all over the city, including bilingual poll workers that were missing, provisional ballots that were refused, IDs being required when they shouldn't have been, and in at least one case, there was an elderly African-American woman who was handed a ballot. This is the exact ballot she was handed, with the incumbent, Dominic Sarno, already checked off. This was sufficient, as you can imagine, for us to organize a coalition of community leaders and experts to formally petition successfully for the U.S. Department of Justice to send a team to Washington. These are some of the partners in that coalition. And the team did three things. First, monitor the election on Election Day, November 8th. Second, look into the voting rights violations from the preliminary election in September. And third, look into non-compliance with the settlement from the last time the Department of Justice sued the city of Springfield for the same kind of stuff. Long story short again, we are waiting any day for the city, for the DOJ to sue the city again, and they saw what we saw. At the same time, we're trying to reduce disparities among voters. Citizens United, as Josh pointed out earlier, is seeking to diminish the influence of all voters, black or white. One ray of hope I'll leave you with, 22-year-old Spanish-speaking Mayor Alex Morse. He seems to have done something to mobilize underrepresented communities that other people haven't. Holyoke's the topic of our next analysis. Look for that. And I'll just leave you with this. Profound voter participation disparities is really antithetical to our aspirations as a society. So let's restore democracy and occupy the vote in 2012 for the presidential election. Thank you all.